everyone. It is Thursday, April 8th, and it is part 2 of taking the awkward out of awkward conversations, de-escalating workplace conflict. And we are back again. If you missed our first one, we'll do a quick recap. We are back with our 2 panelists who are experts in the awkward and experts in employees and employee management and hiring and recruiting and having to have those awkward conversations. First, we have Natasha Kehimkar. She is the CEO of Melita Advisors. She has over 2 decades in HR and global talent experience, and she is a certified professional coach. And we also have Mr. Chris Murdock. He is the co-founder and chief sourcing officer here at IQ Talent Partners, 2 years in the recruiting business, and he took a company from employee number 1 to employee number 200. So over the course of that time, he's had his fair share of awkward conversations. So in case you weren't here for part 1, since we are going to kind of piggyback on part 2 from our discussion on part 1, because we took your feedback and the information that you wanted to hear more about or get more in depth to, since these are only 30 minutes and we will try to keep it to 30 minutes, opening up the last couple of minutes to Q&A. Just drop them there in the chat. We encourage you to be involved. We'll try to talk to you in real time. Then you can hang on after the 30-minute mark for the extended Q&A if we have any. We do want to be able to get you guys in and out in a quick 30-minute session. So Chris, if you want to recap what we talked about in part 1, so we're kind of setting the stage here for part 2 on de-escalation, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do a very quick synopsis. We talked about how to have hard conversations with hiring managers and unrealistic expectations and how to manage them. So it was that was the nutshell, and it was pretty fun to get through that, and the role playing was fun. So that's why we're going to do it again today with the same hiring manager today. And I wanted to just to get started. I was on Facebook yesterday or the day before, and somebody shared a tweet about how to have hard conversations in the workplace and how to handle things. And I actually think this is a great way to kick things off today. The @_Paula Marie wrote, "I don't understand why everybody is so afraid of adult conversations. You don't like me? Tell me. You don't want to talk to me? Don't ignore me. You're mad at me? Express your feelings. I'm wrong? Let me know. Let's talk. We don't agree? Share your viewpoints. It's really not that hard." It really is hard. I agree with everything else there, but I totally disagree with it's not really that hard. It is hard to overcome human nature and being an empathetic person. It is really hard to have these types of open conversations with people. But Natasha, I'll let you kind of roll right into kind of your response to this, and we'll get started. Uh-oh. Did we lose Natasha?
Oh no, we might have lost Natasha, but she will be right back. Oh, there she is.
Hey Natasha, you're muted.
She's back.
You're muted.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
No worries. So we're going to go right into, I just kind of shared that tweet about, if you don't like me, tell me. If you don't agree with me, share your feelings. And at the end of that tweet, she ended it with, "It's really not that hard," and it really is. And so, Natasha, why is it hard? Why is it hard to have these, to be open in the workplace?
It's hard because we've all been conditioned to just, keep the straight face and stiff upper lip. And the reality is we need to feel emotion. It's part of being human. And when we mask it completely, we hide a part of ourselves, and it leaves people wondering, what's going on behind those eyes? What's going on in that brain? And when emotions run high, it's usually, we can say, oh, there's lots of different reasons. Everyone has a different reason for getting really upset or really, shaken up. But really, it boils down to one of 2 issues. Either your values are being questioned, or there's a values clash, right? There's a difference of perspective in terms of what matters, or your sense of identity, your impression of yourself, your belief in who you are is being challenged.
Yeah, and that puts people on the defensive, and it makes them combative at times.
Very much so. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so these heightened emotions, that's where it sort of bubbles up. And the question becomes, are they good or bad? Is it good or bad to have strong emotions at work?
And I've got a poll question for that. So we're gonna let you guys answer. We already had one of our attendees, made the comment that it's especially hard when people are defensive and combative and not everybody wants to talk about it. And so we're going to kind of help you through. That's kind of what this is when that does happen, and to try to break through some of those walls. But in general, what do you think? Are heightened emotions good or bad? And I'm going to launch this poll because we do want to hear back from you guys. And as people are answering here, Chris, what do you think?
So I'll share a couple perspectives, and the thing is, I'm not going to pick on any one generation in the workplace because this is a consistent. These types of things are consistent. But I am going to use an employee example with an employee. But I'm going to kind of combine a couple different employees into this topic. So we deal with people that have and there are people that have anxiety. And there's one employee in particular who, anytime something would change, whether it was a good change, a neutral change, or a bad change, this person had the same response. The anxiety would cause this person to essentially pick a fight with me. And this person would say things that would trigger me, that would challenge my view and my values of IQ talent, that would question me. And in the beginning, I got defensive. And we would eventually de-escalate the situation, but but it would take going back and forth, and I would get defensive. I would be offended by what was being said to me. But ultimately, after a couple times, I started to realize that I needed to be proactive about this person's anxiety, this person's issues. And when the anxiety would get triggered, and when and the thing is, it was just fear of new that was coming on, and I would start proactively asking questions. Okay, is that really what you want to talk about, or do you want to talk about this change that just happened? And I would get ahead of being offended. I would get ahead of being defensive. But it took a little bit for me to get there. But it was that self-reflective aspects of trying to avoid the conflict that caused me to get a little bit more proactive. And then there was another person. I made the mistake of saying, "Stop taking it personally." And Natasha, why is that a bad thing? Why is telling someone stop taking it personally, it's business? Why is that a problem?
Well, we talked about earlier, the reason people get triggered or have those reactions is because your values are being questioned or your sense of identity is being questioned. I mean, what's more personal than those two things? How frustrating must it be when someone says to you, quit taking it personally? Intellectually, we hope we're talking about the issue and not the person. But in real life, in the moment, with heightened emotions, telling somebody that is like invalidating what they're experiencing.
Well, some people have a hard time separating the personal and the professional. And in this case, in some cases, there is no separation. Who they are at work is who they are in real life, outside of the office. And if you're bringing every part of you, and your client interaction is a bad interaction with a client causing you to have an emotional response at the office, I did, after several conversations with this person, realize that person had been told that their entire life. Stop taking things personally. But after we talked, there was such a sense of ownership and accountability. It's such a strong sense of accountability. I called that into question every time I said, stop taking it personally. And we talked about it, and I've never said that again. It was 5 years ago. I have not repeated that same issue, but there's other triggers, calm down. Telling
That's
someone to
another-
calm down
yeah.
is very bad.
Natasha, tell us, really, kind of an answer, while we are answering the question, are heightened emotions, good or bad? And we had a comment that said, is it good or bad, or is it just how they're managed? But in answering that, can you also kind of define for us, what do emotions look like? What are we saying when we're saying emotional?
Well, let me start there, actually. So when emotions come up, they show up in different ways. They can show up as, being angry, being very expressive, tears. It can show up as using authority. So like, hey, the boss wouldn't like that. So ways to sort of needle someone, or you agree with that, don't you? Closed-ended, very much of a leading question that's pushing someone in a direction. It is one way of expressing emotion and a desire to push the person in a certain direction and down a certain path, as opposed to allowing them to explore their own. And so it can show up in that sort of anywhere from that more subtle approach to anger, full on, crying and emotion that way. Or emotion can show up as someone actually retreating and going quiet. Maybe it's the, oh no, everything's fine answer, which is not satisfactory either. And so what Chris was talking about in his story was, strong emotions that are expressed can elicit strong emotion in the other person as well. So it's it can trigger and create this cycle that we go through. And the key, which is, and he did mention, don't say calm down, quit taking it personally, is not the right thing to say in the moment. And when I say right, I mean, it doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help. What does help is something Chris did touch on, which is finding respect for the person and finding a common purpose. When we establish a foundation of respect and common purpose, then we're able to move forward. Until we do that, we get stuck. And so the other thing I will say is, when those, staying away from the going quiet and retreating, we may talk about that in another session, but the heightened emotion, the anger, the yelling, the use of the boss's good name, or hopefully good name, those things are moments where you may actually need to call a break. And always know it is okay to respectfully say, you know what, I'm losing my temper and I need to just take a break. Maybe it isn't all about the person you're talking to, but to have a moment to recognize where you are, or if the person's going on the attack, to set a boundary and say, I'm not okay with where this conversation's going right now. Let's pause and come back.
Yeah,
Tomorrow, back after the weekend.
Yeah, when I worked at Yahoo, we had big, large cubicle farm, but we had conference rooms. And when you work in an open environment, if someone is just raging, everyone can hear it. And there was someone who was being very verbose, using some very colorful language out in the open, and it was about a candidate declining an offer. And I understand you're passionate, but all of a sudden you just hear expletives after expletive. And so I ran over to that person's cube and said, hey, let's grab a room. What happened? And I got them to, stop screaming in the office. We walked into we walked into a conference room that was nearby, and we talked it through and helped kind of de-escalate the situation. And we talked through the issue. And actually, ultimately, he was able to get the candidate back to the table, accepted the offer. But that initial response, I said, if you were to email that candidate right now, your email would just be full of hate because of the way you're responding. Let's take a deep, I didn't say take a deep breath, but okay, we kind of collectively got to the heart of why it was such a problem, talked through the issue. He went back out and sent an email to the candidate and was able to get the candidate back to the table, and without, I even offered to do a snark check or an anger check in the email. If you're going to respond via email, send me the note so I can make sure that you're not going to put the candidate on the defensive or do those types of things. I call it a snark check normally, but like making sure that you're not going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we're
actually,
having, you know what, we have a lot of commentary on that, and I think it's very similar. Amna says, having the social awareness with emotions at work is what's needed, being curious instead of judgmental. And then, you know, to y'all's point, we had someone else tell us that identifying what someone feels emotional about is important, because it's their, to your point, Chris, it means they're passionate about what they do. So having that perspective.
Yeah, and Natasha, on that, you know, what are some other strategies for dealing with somebody that's raging like that? Like in this case, you know, there wasn't really much context as to why there was so many expletives and yelling. So once I got into the room, I asked questions, asked why. What are some other ways to kind of de-escalate those types of anger situations like that?
I think acknowledging, so just recognizing you're really angry or you seem really angry. Yeah, I'm angry. I mean, what the hell? And it can go on and on, but I see you're really angry. Let's get you some privacy. And I want to hear it. Let me help you, or let's have a conversation about what's going on.
What if, Natasha, it's directed at you because it's an awkward conversation that, you know, we started talking about last time. And so you took some of those notes we had last time and started that awkward conversation with a colleague. And then that anger is now directed, you know, at you. And how would you kind of de-escalate that and walk that back?
I would actually take a lot of the same tactics in that I would say something like, I see you're upset. I understand this is important to you. Let's work together to figure out a path forward. Or, you know what? I'm sorry. There are times where an apology, a sincere and genuine apology, will make a world of difference. And when we make mistakes, instead of finger pointing or shirking responsibility, take accountability and apologize. If it truly is completely misdirected and someone is using that kind of tone with you where maybe they're using foul language, you have to set a boundary. You have to set a boundary. It's important for your own self-esteem, and it's important for those around you. It's important for the other person to recognize that they've crossed a line. And using a firm voice and firm language without telling them off in return can help at least stop the conversation in the moment and then come back, but always come back, right? So I had somebody curse at me. It was a very senior person. It was a peer, cursed me out on the phone. And what I said to him was, I hear that you're very angry right now, and you cannot talk to me that way. So I'm going to disconnect. I will call you back in half an hour and we'll continue the conversation. But for right now, I'm calling a timeout. And I hung up. And when we got back on the phone, he apologized and explained how angry he was and he didn't understand what was going on, etc. And I said, I appreciate that you're not in a good place right now. And I appreciate that you're frustrated with me, but you cannot treat me with that level of disrespect. And I used to say something when I was younger. I still say it now though. I don't take that crap from my family. I'm certainly not going to take it from people I work with. And so like we have a very open dialogue in our family. It's very much, you know, high emotion. We love you, you know it. We don't love you, you know it, kind of thing. And so we're very expressive, which is great. I love it. It's what I'm used to. And I won't take somebody cursing at me. It's unacceptable, no matter how badly I've messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. In meetings, I've acknowledged that I've made a mistake or forgot to do something, and somebody, you know, called me out in front of a whole bunch of people. And I acknowledged that, yes, I made the mistake, but let's talk about it offline. This probably isn't the most constructive place for that conversation. And I let everyone know who was really, you know, kind of felt all of a sudden uncomfortable in the room. I read the room and realized that everyone there was uncomfortable. And I acknowledged, yeah, I made a mistake. and
Yeah.
we'll work through it. We'll talk through it. I didn't get defensive, but I did say, I wanted to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which was everyone just heard me getting bawled out, and they felt really uncomfortable because
Yeah.
when you're when one of their coworkers, one of their colleagues is calling out the founder of the firm, they're like, oh crap, that's a career limiting move. No, it wasn't. I completely understood. I acknowledged that I made a mistake, and I said, but let's talk about it in a different place, and to kind of de-escalate the situation in that room. And then I made light of it, of the situation to bring down the embarrassment in the room.
Well, we're going to let Chris go off on me now. So we're going to pick up from our previous role play where in our last session, Chris, our hiring manager, had a top-notch candidate drop out of the process because they didn't think it was a good culture for them. It turns out that Chris had 2 last-minute reschedules. He ended up taking the call on Zoom from the car. The call dropped several times, and he had to keep dialing back in. And Chris wasn't happy with that search process, and we had a conversation about it in our last webinar. But things got a little tense. But we talked it through, right? We managed through it, and we figured out a way to make sure that he was better prepared in the future. But now it's a week later, and here comes Chris.
Natasha, it's been a week since the last time we spoke, and I asked you to expedite a candidate. It was awesome. Moved great. Made the offer. You were supposed to close the person, but instead they declined. Our backup candidate dropped out of the process, and a negative review showed up on Glassdoor that named me and my department. What the heck are you doing? What's going on?
Well, Chris, we are still sort of feeling the repercussions of some of the candidate experience that we talked about in our last conversation, where candidates weren't feeling that they were connecting with you really effectively. And I think that's part of what's still going on and showing up. But
I've never had these problems before. I've been able to build up my department, but I don't understand the negative review. I'm not understanding how you can't get your job done.
Oof.
We've all heard this.
Ouch.
Sorry.
Yeah. Ouch. That really stings, Chris. I take what I do very seriously. I love being a recruiter, and I love partnering with hiring managers. This is a tough search, and we've had some hiccups along the way. And I know we talked about what we're going to do to partner better together, but I think as I think about what's happening, I really want us to stay in that partnership mode. I know this is important to you. I see that it's frustrating for you. And I see that this matters to you. And I also know you have a track record of being a great manager and being a great hiring manager. This hasn't gone well.
Well, I'm getting pressure from above, to get these roles filled. They have to be filled. We're behind on the product. We're behind on everything. What can I do different? What should I be doing differently? To pull the pressure off, or maybe I'm trying to overthink things. But what are some of the things that I should be doing with you to fix this?
All right, so I'm going to call it. Mm-hmm. So in this situation, Chris started to get really frustrated. And if you heard him say, what are you doing about this? And what I did was I did some acknowledgement. I understand that this really matters to you, and validation. You clearly think of yourself as an experienced, effective leader who is really good at finding great candidates and bringing them onto your team. And now you got your boss on your back. You're having all of this stress because you can't fill the job, and not filling the job means you can't get the product out the door. And what I did was I acknowledged and validated. And if you notice, there was a tone change. There was more we that came in. So he started to say the word we. And then he started to also take accountability moving into the next stage of the conversation. So I think Chris, you might have been tempted to go really over the top with me. Thank you for going a little gentle. But how did that feel for you?
Actually, the thing is, I've been on the receiving end of almost those exact words several times, where I've had hiring managers that really just, and clients that thought their company, their organization, or they were, to, quote my grandparents, the bee's knees. And they weren't, anymore. Things have changed in the marketplace. It's in certain roles in certain functional areas, the candidates have multiple choices in multiple markets. And so if you're not in sell mode, if you're just in what are you going to do for me mode, which may have been the case, 5-6 years ago, or even a year ago, but now the competitive nature of a lot of recruiting that goes on, if you're not selling you, if you're not selling the company, you're not going to attract talent. If you're not, and so that's, and not everyone knows how to do that. And so once you get to the point where, like I did in this role play, that, okay, I need to do something different. What I've done before isn't working. I need to do something different. And the only person that's really going to help me with that is you. So it becomes a we situation.
Exactly. When you get back to mutual respect and mutual purpose, a common agenda, then you are able to move forward. Until then, we are stuck.
Yeah. Oh, Stacey, you're muted.
Janice makes the comment that emotions come with maturity, and she mentions emotional intelligence. And I think that's a lot of what you're saying there, Natasha, is emotional intelligence and understanding what's going on with the other person. We do have a question here for you, so I'm going to almost read it verbatim. You guys can help out an individual here as we come to toward the end. It says, "What if you just don't like the person? I mean, you've seen too much. You know that this is who they are because you see it constantly in the workplace. You just don't like it, and now you want to interact with that person as little as possible." What our question has been doing is interacting with the person as little as needed, but addressing the snarky comments when they're made and uncalled for, which then brings defensive-ness on the part of the person that our attendee doesn't like. And then they ask, I simply deal with her with a long-handled spoon, or any other suggestions?
So actually, that is a terrific strategy. Remember, we're asking that you find respect and common purpose, a common agenda. It is not about being best friends. And so I wouldn't feel any guilt or shame that you can't be, this isn't the person you're going to go hang out with. That's not always going to happen. But looking for a common purpose, that's where you can find some magic. And really making sure that you're clear about what are the opportunities to really collaborate, where are the collaboration points necessary, and then find some distance if you need it. I mean, that is also, it is an approach to take. What we don't want is for retreat to happen, right? When you retreat and you're hiding away from that person, then you're never going to really be able to work effectively on issues. So tackle the challenges, find common agenda, give yourself some space, but don't retreat.
And on that, if you are witnessing this, so I'm a very emotional person, like I'm an emotionally driven person. And I was in a conversation with 2 other people. One person was very analytical and data oriented. And so emotional, data oriented, we weren't understanding each other. And the conversation escalated to the point where it wasn't yelling, but it was definitely raised voices. There was another person in the room who just all of a sudden started laughing hysterically. And that de-escalated the situation. And it wasn't laughing at us because, he thought the situation was hilarious. He thought it was funny that we were both arguing the same thing, but didn't know it. And he said, you guys are hilarious. You don't understand that each of you are arguing the same thing. You're just coming at it from a very different direction. And like that, and from that point on, the 2 of us that think differently and feel differently, we understood how to actually, because of that de-escalation and that person taking the time to help articulate what was really going on, really brought us back to solving the problem we were discussing.
Laughter and smiles can sometimes be all the best medicine, right? So we are at 11:30. Natasha, your final takeaways, do's and don'ts. And if anybody has any questions, we will certainly stay on another 5 or 10 minutes for those of you that want to make any comments, drop a question in the Q&A. But finally, Natasha, your final takeaways and do's and don'ts on de-escalating those workplace conflicts.
Know that it's always okay to step away and take a break and set boundaries for yourself. Be self-aware, so recognize when you might be triggered. Either you're the one who's got those high emotions or they're being triggered by someone else's high emotions. And don't suppress emotions, right? We want to express what we're thinking and feeling, but be thoughtful about how we do that. Be conscious about where those emotions are coming from, and make sure to resolve conflict, because when conflict isn't resolved, the emotions simmer. And they keep simmering until they bubble over. Respect and common purpose, right? Find that place of respect for the other person, even if it is simply, let's be civil. And common purpose, find that common agenda, those common objectives that you have to achieve together.
Awesome. And then also I want to end with apologize if you make a mistake. If you do recognize that you were out of line, apologize. Apologies can actually solve a lot of problems. A couple words, I'm sorry, can solve a lot of things, a lot of problems. And then also just to reiterate, try to do not say calm down or stop taking it personally. Those are, that is a great way to have the exact opposite happen. So.
Lost me for a second there. Someone asked if we're going to have a part 3, and yes, we will have a part 3 probably in about 6 weeks. We will send out an email invite, and we really appreciate everyone coming there. Chris, we had someone that gave you a shout out and said work rule: never call out someone during a meeting. So
you can if it's done in a constructive way. Don't call someone, an expletive, or point out that somebody was being a jerk, or you can call somebody out. Just you really have to be careful about how you do it, though.
Right.
So we may want to do one of these on feedback on how to do that, so you don't get into the always and nevers, right?
Yeah.
That often happens in group settings when we start to get stressed. Yeah. And I love this comment from Antonia, maybe calling someone in instead. Beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, what I love is I think you can take some of this advice home. It's both professional and personal. We had someone also say, counting to 10, which is, life is better when we all get along and we all learn to de-escalate, whether it's at the office or even in our personal lives. So I think this has been, really helpful for everyone on multiple levels. So Chris and Natasha, I say thank you so much. And we have recorded this. We'll shoot everybody a recording if you came late. And or want to review some of the notes, and we will hopefully see you with our awkward conversations next time. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Have you ever noticed that the word awkward is awkward to spell? Like I have always thought that.
And awkward to say. Try saying the whole, the webinar name. It's hard.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Signing off.